There's something so sacred about just so radically being with somebody else and truly, truly seeing them as nothing is missing in this moment. Everything is exactly, they are everything they need to be. And to hold out that belief. I don't have to say it, but I can live it. And then seeing how that then creates the possibility and the space for them to begin living into that for themselves. I don't have to do a thing. I just have to know it and be it. I think it was just being really, truly, radically present. Mm-hmm. And then the joy and I honestly, not miracle, but it feels like that, right? Like we're speaking to the sacred.
Hi, and welcome to Feeling Beings Who Think. My name is Ariane Rice. I am a leadership coach, facilitator, and Episcopal priest, and I am delighted that you have joined me for today's conversation. Today, I am speaking with Judy Wolf. Judy is a leadership and team coach and coach supervisor. And after listening to this episode, you are going to gain some valuable insights and come away with some practical frameworks for leading and working better with your team, board, or group of volunteers. Because wherever it is that you lead within a system. That could be a church, that can be a nonprofit, an organization, even your family, or the communities where you show up. Judy helps leaders and teams widen their lens to always see the bigger picture in the midst of their day-to-day responsibilities and how that bigger picture is influencing what it is they do. This, of course, includes the dynamics of us being human and how we work together, but it's also with helping a group remember the larger purpose that they are there to serve, including the objectives that are often assigned and not necessarily chosen. Of course, your team defines who they are, what it is they do, but they also have to fulfill responsibilities that are shaped by others. So are you aware of the distinction and the ways in which that distinction shows up in your team? Because invariably there will be conflicts when you take all of these dynamics into account. So how are you utilizing those conflicts as growth opportunities? How do you use them to build trust and move your work forward in a way that encourages the team to learn from what is happening in real time? Now, if you lead in the nonprofit space or in a faith-based community, the term team coaching might be new for you. And if so, that's great, because this episode will give you a primer, a clear, grounded way in which to understand this methodology and how you can start utilizing it right now to support the work you're doing with your team. Specifically, how you're going to help your team discover their purpose, articulate that clearly, clarify what it is they're there to deliver, and how that supports the larger ecosystem, another great word that shows up in this conversation, that they serve, how they can align their communications to always be letting the organization know of the work that they are doing, and how they can ensure continuous learning is at the center of the work and the ways in which they're holding themselves accountable. Now, woven throughout this conversation is Judy's own vocational journey and the beautiful and expansive way in which she shares her walking through that path wonderfully, I think, connects with the recurring theme of this podcast, that we are feeling beings who think. Despite the fact that we wish we could think our way into everything we do, we feel our way into it. And those feelings are what's influencing our stories, the narratives we are shaping, and even the ways in which our nervous system is responding to the system within which we lead. So, how are you strengthening those inner capacities of presence, my friend, to allow yourself to lead with more awareness, adapt with integrity that aligns with your values, and model the healthy system that you want your organization to be. All right. Thanks, as always, for being here. If this episode supports you in your work, I hope you will take a moment to leave a review, rate, or share it with someone else. And as always, please feel free to connect with me, and you can see how to do that in the show notes. All right, now let's get to today's conversation. Hi, Judy Wolf, and welcome to Feeling Beings Who Think.
Hey, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great that you made the time. I'm excited to continue a conversation that we started earlier this summer and to learn more about your background and the work that you do. So I would just love to get started by you sharing with us, what is it that you do in your work and how is it that you came to do it?
I know, right? Just that little tiny question.
Tiny question.
We have
all the time.
I'm the systemic team coach as part of what I do, and Peter Hawkins is, sort of one of the leading thinkers in the world around systemic team coaching. But he has this wonderful question for groups, which is, in 2 minutes, tell me the story of your life from the time you were born till the moment you arrived in this room. In 2 minutes, right? So there's this.
Love it.
Feel like when you just asked that question, I had that same and what to highlight, right? No, but. As I just said, I'm an executive and team coach is sort of what I put out in the world, which means I work with leaders, teams, organizations, teams of teams to, really, I want to say help them not only be the best that they can be in the world, but to really start thinking through the lens of how do we create value in the world, and how do we everything that we're doing, everything that we're thinking, deciding, conversing around, wrestling with, that we're not only thinking through the lens of this immediate moment, but we're thinking about the broader system, we're thinking about the future, and sort of saying, hey, wait a minute, everything I do ripples out. Everything we do ripples out, which is part of what attracted me to the whole systemic team coaching, almost say ecosystemic team coaching.
I can't
world.
wait to talk more about all these words. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, just how do we even put into words this idea of thinking beyond ourselves in everything that we do? So that's a big piece. The coaching thing itself, and I also am a coach supervisor. I love working with coaches who are basically creating a space in which they can self-reflect, and I think of it as keeping oneself as an instrument as clean and clear as possible, so we can show up in the spaces that we do self-aware, and because we always have an impact on whatever system we enter, but how can we be really aware of what we bring with us and what we might be responding to, what's mine, what's yours, and then having a place to go with peers to unpack that and look at it and be real and vulnerable and human in our own work, so that we can support our clients in doing the same thing.
The word that kept coming into my mind as you were speaking was consciousness raising.
Yeah. Beautiful.
All of this work is around helping people shift, raise, expand, explore consciousness. So how in the world does one get interested in things like systematic team coaching? Because I doubt that's what you went to college for.
Right? I know. I feel like I stumble into all these little lucky moments, never knowing where they're going to end, but always trusting that I'll get there if I just keep paying attention along the way. So you would be correct. I was raised by a psychotherapist, which I know I shared with you back in July, but it feels like a really important
fascinating
piece.
Fun fact.
And I always have to give the caveat that this wasn't just a therapist, the whole cobbler's children go barefoot thing. This was a therapist who kept doing her own work until the day she passed away, right? She just kept going and stretching her own awareness and her own questioning. So there's that. I feel like that had a big piece. And then I continued. I was lucky enough to have friends who were very self-aware and thoughtful and questioning as well. So all through high school, I was hanging out with a group of kids who were, sober and doing this self-awareness type work. And, you would greet people with hugs and you would, have fun without extra substances, right? And I had a really creative group of very diverse, we had jocks, we had artists, we had actors, we had smart kids, we had, the whole mix in my group in high school. So there was a lot of diversity of thought there. The neighborhood I was raised in was religiously diverse. We had some diversity when it comes to race, a little bit with a socioeconomic. So there was a little bit of, I was raised in a bubble of, that I didn't realize the whole world didn't look like this, when I left. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until I went to college that I started to figure some of that out. But I studied psychology as an undergrad and then decided I didn't want to just follow blindly in my mom's footsteps. So I went on and went out into the working world, and I accidentally stumbled across communications. Internal communications was my doorway in. Communications as a career path. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was partly, I think I was attracted to it partly because of I see in systems, right? I see in broader patterns. I see that bigger picture, and getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And in order to support good decision making, there's a lot that goes into that. And
yes, there is.
Yeah.
We could talk about some of that.
Right? And then freelance marketing consultant, and then ended up working for an independent living center doing communications. And then I ended up stumbling across a disaster recovery consulting company doing communications there as well. Wow. So I got exposed to a whole other world. And so I got to see all these different ways of being in the world and different types of industries, and all because I tell people I made my living off of other people's blank page syndrome. Like I could put together a proposal, or I could, do the marketing piece. And I was always able to synthesize what people were giving me and turn it into something useful.
Yes. And you're also, all of the industries you describe are really connected with psychology. Advertising, I was in advertising for a while. And I had a bishop tell me, well, you're always in advertising. You're just advertising something very different.
Right?
Once you become a priest. But yes, advertising is all psychology, right?
Yeah. It's interesting.
And disaster recovery, I would think, would be very similar too, in terms of psychology. The way in which we respond versus react, or deal with the reactions and then learn how to respond, the way we shape narrative around events that are outside of our control. So it's also connected in a way when you look back.
Well, and I love that you're bringing the concept of narrative into it. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. What are the narratives that we tell ourselves and each other? I've been doing, I've just been putting together some, a couple of different offsites for some new teams that I'm working with. And even just working through what's the experience we're wanting to create? If we've got a couple of days, what's the experience we want to walk the participants through, while also giving them these moments to reflect and learn. But there's sort of this iterative process of walking people through. And anytime somebody was like, well, what if we did this first or that? I was so aware of my brain being like, ooh, what's the narrative if we do it that way? And what's the narrative if we do it this way? And how do we make this a coherent, cohesive journey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it would be super great if you could give a 101 primer on team coaching, because I know there will be people listening to this podcast. I know in the clergy world, in the church world, that's not a word or a phrase that's utilized in any way. So can you just really explain to somebody who has no idea what is team coaching? What does that mean?
Oh, that's a great question. And where to start? So if we think about team coaching, if we think of a group of people who come together, one of the ways that we determine, are you a group? Are you a team? Is if there, and there are definitions out there you can look up, and I don't have any of them memorized, much as I probably should. But if we think about a team is a group of people that have come together to accomplish something that they can only accomplish together. So they have a unified purpose, a unified, I guess I want to say a need to work together in order to accomplish and create value for whatever stakeholders or like just think of them as ecosystem partners, right? Stakeholders, if we think of that, there's sort of like some colonizing problematic language there, especially in certain countries, like, Canada's very aware of language around saying stakeholders, for instance. So I'm always aware too of language, and yet it's such a common one that it's easy to shorthand and say, like, who has some kind of vested interest in our company, organization,
yes.
team.
Well, ecosystems, though, is such a better phrase.
Right?
Ecosystems is such a better phrase than stakeholders, even just like the violence of the word stakeholder.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So who are the people who sort of depend on or have an interest in what this team does? And how do we want to refer to them? That can be a conversation for a team too, right? So I'm thinking about now, like, the 5 disciplines framework, I think, is a great way to think about that. And that's Peter Hawkins' framework. The first discipline is around going out and commissioning. So basically going out to your stakeholders, your ecosystem partners, and finding out what's the need, what's the value that they need this team to create. So the idea is that the team doesn't make up its purpose. The team discovers its purpose. Why are we here? And then we have the idea that then the team takes that why and they say, okay, now what are we going to do to deliver that value? And that's where we get, like, okay, what are our goals? What are our objectives? What are the roles we need to take on in order to do that? How are we going to measure whether we're doing it well? And there can be this conversation that happens between the team and their ecosystem partners, stakeholders, to say, hey, did we get this right? Does this feel like it'll deliver the value you're looking for? And so that becomes a conversation. So it's not just done in isolation. Discipline, and that's clarifying. So clarifying the what, we're going to do to deliver on the why. And then you can get into discipline 3, and this is where most teams feel the most pain. And the reason that, coaches or whatever, consultants, whoever, get called in most often is around the team dynamics, right? The how are we going to be together in order to deliver the what?
Psychology.
Exactly. And so this is where you get the, how are we going to communicate? What are our team norms, our team agreements around how we're going to be together, how our team dynamics, all the rest of it sort of fit into that humans working together, and who are we, how are we together to do the work that we're here to do. And that's where often, and you don't have to start with any of these in particular, but that's often the one that creates the biggest pain points. But often, when you think about the dynamics, it's really easy to point at an individual within a system and say they're the problem, when really they might be unclear on the roles or responsibilities, or like we're misaligned on expectations or goals. So, or are we all clear on what's the purpose we're here to serve? Or have we lost track of that, right? So we can sometimes clear up the dynamics by getting clear on some of the other factors.
So wait, can we just pause here, though? Because I would love to know a little bit more. I am curious about, is there a story, an example, or you could just also share the process. How do you both let a group of people know, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable for a period of time and it's okay. So can we just normalize discomfort here?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, in some ways, I'm like sort of what you just did, right? But you just made me think back to when we were talking about the supervision piece. Like, if I, as a coach and a human being, am not comfortable sitting in that discomfort, then it's going to be really hard for me to do what you just demonstrated. So am I willing to allow the discomfort, even when the team's like, oh, I want to move on? Like, what? Am I willing to say, hey, could we just take a look at what's happening in the room right now? And some of it's built on by doing some of the team agreements, like in advance, when we're not in it, saying, okay, how do we want to be together in order to bring out the best in ourselves and each other? What do we need from ourselves and each other to create the space we need to do our work here? And then how do we carry that beyond this room? Many teams haven't necessarily taken the time to do that. And even if they have done, say, a values exercise, checking in to say, are we living those values? What are the behaviors that we will be exhibiting, and are we holding each other to those? So there's that. So some of it's that intentional setting it up in advance, and not only saying what's the ideal, but also how do we want to be together when we're falling short of that? And what happens when it gets uncomfortable? So having some of those conversations, and maybe, people will be like, oh, could we have a safe word? Could we have a whatever? Like, what are the ways we're going to bring it up in a meeting or in the hallway or whatever it is? That can be really useful. And then having a neutral third party, this is a team coach, when those are first being practiced, somebody who's checking in and saying, how are y'all doing with that, can be really useful. The team leader and team members all, of course, are intimately involved in that as well. So there's a really, I'm just thinking about, because ultimately a team coach is ideally coming in, kind of holding the space for the team to do the work.
I love watching your hands.
I know. I'm like,
make this shape. But it's true. The spherical nature of it's true. The constant rotating of it's true. The kind of getting the 180, 360 view, and then the balcony and in the dance floor. I mean, all of it's true.
All of it. And ultimately it's just the team learning to do it. It's like I'm the training wheels, and then at some point they're just going to be doing it themselves, right? Like, so I'm working myself out of a job, or they call me in because something's changed. Hey, we want to put ourselves through a process where we're going to spend time focusing on how we're going to be together, or let's get clear on our roles. And we know that the day-to-day is going to just overwhelm this. Our meetings are going to be taken up by the things we have to do. So we're going to intentionally set aside, for an offsite, or we're going to do a regular half-day check-in to make sure that we're staying on track with things. And so you can build out an engagement where over time the team is able to work on the things they need to work on and hold themselves accountable to that. And then there's also this element where the team coach can come into the room in a business as usual meeting and observe what's going on in the meeting. So it can be like, taking notes on the behaviors that are in the room, calling a timeout just to invite the team in to reflect on, okay, you said you wanted to do this in the offsite, and now I'm seeing you out in the wild. And are you actually living? And what might you be doing differently, or what could you apply from what you agreed on? And then the team can take on those habits as well. So they can begin, that's modeled now, and they can begin to, in their meetings, say, okay, could we do a check-in at the beginning? Can we do a check-in in the middle? Could we do a debrief at the end? For example, what are the things that we could start practicing? So that was discipline 3. Discipline 4 is then also, we as a team, are we aligned on the message going back out to those ecosystem partners? What are we communicating? How are we staying aligned with? Who owns which relationships? Could anybody from any other part of the organization or outside the organization talk to anyone on this team and get the same message? And then discipline 5 sits right at the center of all these. That's sort of a 4-quadrant model. And the discipline 5 is core learning. And the idea that as individuals and as a team, we're continually building in opportunities to reflect and learn and continuously grow and respond to the world around us.
Hi there. Just a brief interruption to say that I know for those of you who are leading nonprofits, those of you who are clergy, there are a lot of demands on your time. You carry a heavy load. People are constantly seeking out your wisdom, your guidance, and your support. It is a lot. So I wanted to offer you a very simple, supportive practice that you can download in the show notes. And if you're curious to know about the kind of work I do with leaders just like yourself, work I do with congregations, with boards, with vestries, in retreats and workshops, then there's a link to find out more about that too. Okay, let's get to today's conversation. Okay. No one can graduate college and do these things. It's just not humanly possible because it simply requires a level of life living experience working through a lot of your own stuff. There's no way you can be in a room full of people and hold space for discomfort if you don't know what that is as a human person in your own life, right? So I'm just curious if there was an experience in your world where you kind of became aware of like, oh, that this is now part of me.
Well, I feel like this actually picks up a little bit on your question around how did you actually get to be a coach, right?
Yes.
Because I had just gotten to the disaster recovery consulting company, and I was volunteering out in the community doing mediation work as well. And I found that I really loved that. There's somehow, and I've particularly loved like the family and divorce and the custody stuff. I mean, I liked the messier human dynamic
Messier, the
stuff.
family dynamic.
I know,
Plenty
right?
to choose
Versus it's like landlord tenant. Somebody else can do that. I like this stuff. But you know what I loved? It was because people had a stake in what was the outcome. Like they were invested in what they got out of it. And so you see, like people show up. It wasn't just like, yeah, whatever. It's about money. This was like about the kids, or it was about the relationship,
Yeah.
and about the feelings and emotions involved. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So,
it's very, very challenging.
yeah. And how do we honor all of the human beings in the room when they're at a point where they're needing to have a conversation around like how do we navigate this moment in our lives when we might not be at our best and we may not be loving what's happening to us? Like how can we still be showing up in the room? So there was that. I was aware of loving that work. I loved that, sort of the business side and this very creative team that I worked on. I mean, responding to disasters, it's like you, by default, you cannot plan for that, right? Like you just don't, you have to walk in and build the plane as you fly it. And I loved that kind of work as well. And I was part of the senior leadership team that was doing succession planning. So we were receiving executive coaching as part of that. And there was something about that process that I went, oh, this is it. Like it brought everything together. The psychology, the mediation, the business, the communications, like all of it. And that's the river I need to jump in, right? So I'm going to go do that. I was attracted to the people who were doing more of that kind of work. How can we just truly be with what is? And of course, I've got, meditation and mindfulness and yoga and all the rest of it background. So,
well, you say, of course, but I mean, there's a part of you that was attracted to that.
Exactly.
I mean, not everybody's even called. So how did you move in that direction?
How do I do the thing? I mean, how do any of us decide what's the thing?
Well, did you, so from like, when I first tried yoga, I got so angry. And then actually I hurt myself and wound up dislocating an elbow. And I've decided that the universe, God, was basically like, oh, you're not ready for yoga yet. Like in my 20s, I was not ready for yoga. It made me angry. It made me frustrated. I was so aware of like what I saw happening around me with people I all thought were better than me. And my body wouldn't do what I wanted it to do on command. And I had no tolerance for it. In my 40s, after failing or after hurting my body, and having to be more patient and life kind of making me do health stuff like that differently. Now, like I love yoga, and meditation in a way. I mean, my gosh, I'm a priest, and believe me, there are plenty of clergy people who it's almost like the last thing on our to-do list is our prayer and meditation life because we're busy taking care of a lot of other people and there's a lot of things to do and a lot of things to take care of. So I feel like so many of the types of things that require a level of comfort with discomfort and patience and being present to what is versus being present to being versus doing. I had no capacity for that. So for you, was it always the case that you were kind of drawn towards these things?
Got it. No, thank you. That's a beautiful segue. I was very aware as I was listening to you. I was like, where did yoga actually start? Because I was doing more like whitewater kayaking and ice climbing. And like I was out, doing these very active. And I actually pulled my Achilles tendon or tore it. And I thought that it was one of those where I like left it long enough that I started reading about it and recognizing it was one of those where I was like, well, if it hasn't healed, if you haven't done your whatever in the 3 months, it might never heal. And I was like, oh, no way, that's not happening. So I totally dedicated myself to like doing the PT exercises. I was looking at Runner's World and all the rest of it. And But it was you had to give it months to heal. And I think that was when I actually started doing yoga to, keep up. For me, it started out being more the more active, keeping up the strength, keeping up the flexibility piece. But one of the things I remember discovering, because I'm very kinesthetic, so one of the things that I discovered as I was doing it is how it's almost like a metaphor for being, like being in your body and the movement. And what I started to really fall in love with was the transitions between poses. So it wasn't about the pose itself or getting it perfect. It was about how conscious can I be to every part of the movement between as well. And that almost became, it was like the connections between became the thing. And I think that's what really did it for me.
Can you remember what was hard for you when you first started coaching? Like where your growing pains were?
I remember that coaching actually felt very natural for me. And I think part of that was because of, my background, my mom, but also the mediation piece. Because I came into it. There's this whole thing in coaching about being not attached to outcome. And I came in, I came in already that way. Because, that just sort of, there's something about walking alongside people and being honored by the sacredness of being with someone. And I think that's actually part of what not only drew me to coaching, but also kept me in coaching, is that's not like a thing you just do and go, got it now. Like, it's every moment is an active cultivation, remembering.
What are some of the nuances between working with a system versus working with an individual?
I think of individuals as a microcosm of the system. So it's more about like, where are you focused? Because everybody's embedded in multiple systems. And if I'm working with an individual, how are we raising consciousness and awareness around what can I influence and do something about, and what's out of my control, of course. But then also, where do I fit within this broader world, and how do I choose to view it, and how am I going to respond to the things that happen to me? And what does that then do to the system? So there's that piece of it. And then if I pull out a little bit and I look at, say, a group of people, there's the team. Now they have there's the individual nodes, but they're also interconnected and forming a new whole, WHOLE, that is still just a node within a broader system of nodes, right? So now we have teams of teams within an organization, say. And now how do not only the individuals operate within the team, but the teams operate between themselves? And then, of course, you go further out and you've got organizations with multiple divisions, or you've got organizations working with other partners within their community, for instance, or across the nation or the globe. And I become fascinated by the interconnections. How do we become aware of those? When what's right in front of us is so much easier to focus on, how do we pause for a moment, as you said earlier, get up on the balcony and go, oh, okay, wait a minute, whose voice isn't in the room? What might they need from us? And what's happening between us? I think people are really aware of, friction points, right? Like, that can be a really good indicator of what needs attention.
It's also similar to me, but loving the transitions in the yoga practice.
Oh, yeah.
It's, being just highlighting the in-betweens.
Yeah. Yeah, and that'll probably take some reflection of like, why that? So what comes up for you when you think about the in-betweens?
That we don't pay enough attention to them, and that we want to we always want to get somewhere. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I struggled with those other types of exercise, with yoga versus exercise that's about a goal. We're just trained. I mean, one of the things that, of course, most of us can't come into doing this kind of work right at the outset, because there's a maturation piece for sure. But we also, like, this is not a part of most of our educational systems. This is not a part of the way in which we seek to better human in the world through the littler humans that we're supposed to be shepherding. I mean, when I think about chapel and the things I did with a group of preschoolers, you know, and simply trying to do more of like encouraging the questions, encouraging the curiosity. There's no right and wrong. Being afraid of telling some of the Bible stories that are the most well known because they're too black and white, and they also are way too good bad. And at the same time, like, these are young children, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting systems training and communications training right at the get-go. I mean, you're getting how to even like hold space for a conversation.
Yeah, the communication skills, just some of the basic, like, how do you give somebody feedback? How do you have a hard conversation? How do you
We don't pay
support
attention
somebody?
to any of those kinds of things in our family. I mean,
Yeah.
this whole season of this podcast is all to me. I am so aware of the practice of conversation. Conversation as a sacred practice. Conversation as an everywhere and always opportunity to bring some mindfulness, some attentiveness, intentionality, to honor something that is generated in real time between people that will never happen again and is literally a third thing. So, I mean, this connects with a lot of other.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to take that away with me. Like, conversation with the sacred practice is, I mean, that is coaching, that is team coaching, that is what you're doing. And it's so true. And it's one of those things that feels like, I think, people are lamenting the impact of social media and da, 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 da.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things we're talking about really getting lost, right? Is the ability to sit down with somebody, whether they agree with you or disagree with you, and to just get curious about, so what is it that shapes you? And what's our relationship?
And what's, without being tied to outcome
Yeah.
in the conversation. I mean, even mediation is an example, I think, of when we're really aware that the conversation is around generating something that two people individually cannot do on their own.
Yeah.
It's also a process of asking for help in a way that we're not really encouraged to do.
Well, I think a lot about, you just said this, and I think it's true with mediation, and it's also true. I always tell this to people with coaching of any variety, is there something about the moment that we set the intention to, whether it's the asking for help or but that also, in your example, it also speaks to, we have an intention of coming together and talking, and we have an intention of figuring this out. And that starts everything moving. Right? Even just deciding and making that decision to ask for help or to come for coaching or whatever it is, I always tell people are already 80% of the way there when they show up in the room, because they've made the decision to set aside that time for themselves and to move toward whatever it is they're wanting. Whether that's a particular goal or it's just greater self-awareness, whatever it is, they've decided to set that as a priority in their life.
So I am noticing time, and I am curious if there is a story, experience, recent past, not as recent past, which really for you describes like you being in your zone. This is where I was really living into my values, really living into, what I believe I offer in the world, and which usually means you're receiving something at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Usually the both and in that flow. So I'm curious if there is something you can share from your experience that speaks to that.
The thing that immediately came into mind was like every coaching conversation I have, but and there's something, the individual coaching conversations, right? There feels like they're I'm going to go back to the word sacred. There's something so sacred about just so radically being with somebody else and truly, truly seeing them as nothing is missing in this moment. Everything is exactly, they are everything they need to be. And to hold out that belief. I don't have to say it, but I can live it. And then seeing how that then creates the possibility and the space for them to begin living into that for themselves. I don't have to do a thing. I just have to know it and be it. I think it was just being really, truly, radically present.
Mm-hmm.
And then the joy and, I honestly, not miracle, but it feels like that, right? Like we're speaking to the sacred of watching what unfolds. And so being a witness to that, and that can be on the individual side. It can also be on the team side when teams start to be like, get past their own fears and holdups and beliefs about each other, and they start creating something together that they weren't creating before. And then it's almost like, oh, this is what's possible. Those moments, I think, are really, for me, they may even pass unnoticed in the worlds of the folks in the room. For me, they feel really profound when I'm witnessing them.
Yes.
So I think it's that.
I wholeheartedly agree. And it's what you were saying, like the infinite insignificance of the something that at the same time is infinitely significant. It's everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to thought partner or just, be in this space with you and generate whatever this is that we generated, but it's still, I'm so grateful.
Same here. Let's do it again. This was just so gorgeous. Thank you for creating this space. And
where can people find you? Just say a little bit about where they can find you.
I've got a website, judywolf.com, JUDYWOLF.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.